ASimon.
Boy, talk about some nice musical therapy before you have to speak.
I called her first on the phone. She doesn't want me to say this. I saw her on television. I called her on the phone. She just about hung up on me. What do you want? I'm in a class. I'm talking to me. So I called back and I said, no, please, I know you've never heard of me. You've never heard of the conference. 3 phone calls later, she finally took my call because she went to the website and saw that I was kosher. Thank you very much. Nice meeting you.
Oh, good. What Richard doesn't understand is that once they find out that you are doing the science for the X-Files, you get a lot of weird phone calls. I mean, people want you to speak at all these strange science fiction conventions, and you just want to say no, no. And I thought, you know, he was one of those. Sorry. And he is, yeah, and see, I come and... No, it's been a great week. So good morning. Boy, after that party last night, I'm surprised we're all here. I thought I'd start by telling you how a professor and a virologist, a researcher at the University of Massachusetts ends up as a science advisor for the X-Files. So for those of you who aren't glued to your television sets on Sunday evening, the X-Files is a show about 2 FBI agents that investigate cases of a paranormal nature. So we have one of the FBI agents is Fox Mulder, and he's the believer. I mean, he's never seen a light, you know, lights in the sky he didn't think originated with some alien spacecraft. And then you have, on the other side, you have Dana Scully, scientist. She's the skeptic. I mean, she wants to see the facts before she'll believe. I mean, although you'd think after 7 years of being infected by alien organisms and kidnapped by aliens, you'd think she'd begin to believe. But, you know, she's the skeptic. So week after week, our intrepid FBI agents, you know, they come across a lot of very strange creatures and a lot of strange situations, a lot of which involve viruses, my favorite organism. So I guess it would make sense that Chris Carter, the creator of the show, when he was looking for someone to help with the science, that he would go to a virologist. And that, I don't know, maybe that makes too much sense for Hollywood, because of course that isn't true at all. And I've been told to tell the truth. Scientists, we like to tell the truth. So what's the truth? The truth is that Chris Carter's married to my mother's best friend. And when he needed to talk to a scientist, he thought of the only scientist that he knows, which was me. So here came the first season, and I get this phone call from my mother. And she goes, she calls me, you know. She likes me. She likes me a little more than, well, I don't know. She's not quite like Art Buchwald's mother. But she calls me and she says, you know, did you know that Chris, and she always calls him Dory's Chris. Okay, so do you know that Dory's Chris has a new television series called The X-Files? And it just so happened I've been watching it from the beginning. I really liked the show. What I liked about it so much was the character of Scully. I mean, here they had a scientist, a woman scientist, on a television series who wasn't being portrayed as some geek or some evil person, but she was being portrayed realistically. I mean, she was gorgeous. That was realistic. You know, and she wanted the facts, and she was an equal partner with Mulder. I mean, I really liked that. So I'd been actually watching the show. And she said, well, Chris, you know, I was having dinner with Chris the other day, and he wants to talk to you, but he doesn't want to call you himself because he's worried, you know, that he's going to bother you. And this was back when I was like the big professor and Chris was the little producer. Now it's like, whoa. So he said, well, you call her and ask. Will she talk to me? So my mom calls me and she said, you know, will you talk to Chris? I said, well, of course, have him call me. You know, this is a guy I used to have dinner with, you know, at Thanksgiving and Passover. You know, of course I'd talk to him. So Chris calls the next day, and I tell him I'm a fan of the show, you know, one of the 10, I guess, at the time. So he was pretty impressed by that. And he said, okay, I have a situation that I want to present in the last episode of the first season. He said, I want to establish in this episode that aliens are real. Oh, good. And so as a scientist, if you were handed a strange microorganism you know, like a bacteria. How would you study it? What would you do? That's what he asked me. That's an easy question for a scientist. So I said, the first thing I would do is grow more of it, because the last thing you want to do is run out of your sample. So I said, you know, so he said, well, how would you grow it? So I said, well, I'd get an Erlenmeyer flask, and I'd put this, you know, liquid in it, rich broth, that looks like weak coffee, the color of weak coffee. I mean, you see Erlenmeyer flasks when you look at, you know, shows that like have science in them. These Erlenmeyer flasks are filled with, you know, green liquid, and blue liquid, and pink liquid. I mean, you know, it looks a little bit like this. We never see those colors in the lab. So, you know, I said, okay, weak coffee. So I'm sure he's scribbling weak coffee, because when I got the script, it said color of weak coffee, so I like that. And you'd grow more of it, and I said that would only take a scientist about 10 years. He thought that might be boring for the audience, so I don't know. I didn't think it was boring. So, but, you know, what do I know? I'm just a scientist. So you know, so we established that they would already be growing this. So then he said, okay, then what would you do next? So the next thing I would do is to look at it under a microscope. And this is where I was so happy to be talking to Chris, because frankly, scientists cannot watch any shows or movies on science without wincing. I mean, the microscopes are wrong, the dialogue is wrong, the scientists are always being portrayed as evil. I mean, that's my profession. I mean, we are always portrayed as bow-tied geeks who are evil. Well, I mean, it's a little discouraging, because how are we supposed to attract bright young minds into science? You know, get them out of this technology stuff. But attract them into science when we're being portrayed as being evil. It's tough. So I said, okay, Chris, great. You know, you'd look at it under a microscope. And I said, please use the right microscope, not some stupid light microscope from high school. You don't see a virus, or you don't see a bacteria with that. But instead, what you should do is use an electron microscope, a scanning electron microscope. It's only $500,000. It fits in the budget. Or he could borrow one. So he said, fine, you know, electron microscope. And then I said, you know, this is the type of microscope that has a video screen. So I said, are you going to actually show a picture of the alien bacteria on the screen? And he said, well, yeah. So I said, well, you know, don't show a real bacterium. You know, bacteria, I mean, you probably don't see a lot of bacteria around, but bacteria are boring. They are really boring. I mean, if I was a bacteria up here, you would be bored. I mean, bacteria, they're round, they're symmetrical, they're smooth, they are boring. So I said, this is an alien bacteria. Alien bacteria can't be boring. So I said, instead of using terrestrial bacteria, use something much more fascinating. Use plant pollen. Because pollen is symmetrical, but it's got lots of little nooks and crannies, and it would look great as an alien bacteria. And I've brought some clips with me today. So in this first clip, you're going to see Agent Scully, the scientist. She's going to bring her flask of bacteria to a scientist at Georgetown University who's going to first look at it under the microscope and then do the second experiment, which I suggested, which is to slice it open, do a thin section, and see what's going on inside it. So here in this first clip is this conversation between Scully and the scientist, where you'll see the bacteria. Lights down. Okay. Okay, good. It was about 15 minutes into it. There's a virus in the, yeah. Oh, did they miss? They missed up where it would start?
Tony, just tell us what's happening. So
what's going on? They're queuing up the tape.
Okay.
1 second.
Never say 1 second when it's going to be 30 seconds. Okay. 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Well, we got a little action out there.
It was all set earlier. Where's Mulder and Scully? Okay, here.
Where you got it?
It was recovered at a crime scene.
We've come a long way from Colonel Mustard in the den with the rope, haven't we?
No, I'm expecting it'll turn out to be nothing.
No. No, you've definitely got something here. Wow. Look at this.
What are they?
Well, they're the size of bacteria, but no bacteria I've ever seen.
That's
How do you
right, because
mean?
they're pollen.
And those bacteria are symmetrical and smooth. These are, I don't know, strange.
You have no way of identifying them?
Well, we could do a freeze fracture. Take a thin slice off and see what's going on inside these babies, if you don't mind waiting.
No, no.
Okay, so they look at it under a microscope. So then Chris said, well, what would you do next? So next is actually very easy to come up with as well. If we're handed some strange microorganism, we want to see where it fits in the tree of life, something we're going to be hearing about a little later on today. So what we would do is we would actually determine the sequence of one of its genes. And there's a particular gene that we always choose. And DNA, of course, is made up of these 4 chemicals called nucleotides. And the order of these nucleotides in a gene and how similar it is to another organism tells you how related it is. So the next thing that she would do is she would actually sequence some of its DNA. And so that's what we went ahead to do. Then Chris said to me, but wait a second, what could she find out that would instantly scream out that these were extraterrestrial? Okay, it's not a question I get asked every day. So it's like, you know, how would I know if what I was studying in the lab was alien? Okay? Because it's not the first hypothesis that you come up with usually if you have something strange. So I'm trying to think, okay, it has to be something simple. It's got to be something we all share, from bacteria to people, that this wouldn't share. And it has to be something that can be explained in like 3 sentences. So I thought, okay, well, let's just take DNA, because she's sequencing it anyway. So I thought, okay, we all have DNA, bacteria, a few viruses don't, everything else, we all have DNA. It's all the same 4 chemicals. What if this had 6? 6 chemicals, okay? 3 pairs of 3 pairs, so 6. And that would make her instantly think that this was extraterrestrial. So Chris says to me, so what would you do if that happened to you? I said, well, I mean, if it had happened today, I would have called and said, I want an invitation to TED, 11. Right? I have a story to tell, real good one. But no, this happened about 7 years ago. So I said, what would you do? I said, I'd call the government. So you're actually going to see in this next clip that she says she's going to call the government. So why don't we go ahead and let's go ahead and run the next clip. Yeah, the Census Department, right?
Agent Scully.
Oh, Dr. Carpenter, I fell asleep.
I've done some work. These are the DNA sequences from the bacteria sample you brought in. You seem to know something about molecular biology. Do you know what you're looking at?
That's a real
Yeah, I
sequencing
think those are
autorad.
genes.
That's really what it
Right.
would look like.
They're called base pairs. Each pair is made up of something called a nucleotide. Only 4 nucleotides exist in DNA. 4. And through some miracle of design that we have yet to fathom, every living thing is created out of these 4 basic building blocks. What you're looking at is a sequence of genes from the bacteria sample. Normally, we'd find no gaps in the sequence. But with these bacteria, we do.
Why is that?
I don't know why, but I tell you, under any other circumstances, my first call would have been to the government.
What exactly did you find?
A 5th and 6th DNA nucleotide. A new base pair. Agent Scully, what you are looking at, it exists nowhere in nature. It would have to be, by definition, extraterrestrial.
That's right. Now, the thing about the gaps was sort of funny because I was trying to come up with how they could actually show a sequencing autorad that would have gaps in these ladders. Because if you had gaps, then you might think that there were things missing, and the missing things would be the extra nucleotides. I mean, I'm trying to come up with something that doesn't exist, you have to understand. So I'm trying to come up with how you would doctor that so that you would actually see gaps. And then it occurs to me, you know, this is so stupid. I mean, how many people in this room looked at that and realized that there were no gaps? Maybe two, maybe Jim, maybe Brett. That's it. So I thought, you know, I told Chris, just have her point to it and say, you know, look at the gaps. And of course, there are no gaps. You know, look at the gaps. This means there's an extra nucleotide-based pairs. So now, Chris, when we were talking about this, he decided to do me a little favor. He decided to name the character after me. And I was really psyched by that. And I think we have a piece of the script. We have a page from the script. Yeah, so this is the original script that I got. And look at the name of the scientist there. See? Dr. Simon. I mean, it was great. Here, I mean, this is just a little bit of what I do. So I get the scripts, I make all these little changes, and Chris always uses them, which is really nice. But so I get my script, and you know, it's Dr. Simon. I am really, really psyched by this. Then came, well, you know, then the bad news started. I mean, here I first thought, I mean, here's Dr. Simon helping Mulder and Scully in their quest for the truth. And I saw her as a reoccurring character. You know, episode after episode, season after season, here, you know, she was going to be helping them find the truth. I mean, this was great. I was really, really thrilled. So the first piece of bad news came when Chris called me and said, you know, Ann, you know, we're using Georgetown University as a backdrop, and there's an Ann Simon in Georgetown University. I mean, there's 3 Ann Simons in the world in science, and one of them is at Georgetown University. Is that luck? That's not luck. So we had to change the name to Carpenter, which is my husband's last name, now my ex-husband, so it becomes even more fun. So, but still, here was Ann Carpenter, you know, okay, helping Mulder and Scully in their quest for the truth. I was still okay. So I'm reading my script, and I come to the following scene. See, Georgetown. Burn.
Excuse me, I'm looking for Dr. Ann Carpenter. I've been unable to reach her by phone, and she's not in her office.
She was in a terrible car accident, her whole family. And Dr. Carpenter is
Do you hear that? Her whole family. He killed me off and my entire family. And it just goes to show, I mean, it is really dangerous to be a, you know, to be a scientist on the X-Files. I mean, the scientists are there to be helpful, and, you know, they end up paying the ultimate price. But you would think after 7 seasons, I mean, let's say it this way. If I was sitting in my lab and Mulder and Scully came through the door, I would run screaming for the other exit. I mean, I am not that brave. So, you know, so we started doing these conversations that led to these scripts. And, you know, there's a lot of really neat, strange creatures in the X-Files. There's fluke men, half man, half worm, you know, vampires, wolves, werewolves. You know, it's been a lot of fun. And I'm okay with all that. I mean, this is science fiction. It's not supposed to be real. Until I got the movie script. And I'm reading the movie script, and Chris said he's going to make me science advisor, and I get my name in the credits. And this may not sound cool to some members of this audience, but it was really cool for me. So, you know, I'm reading through the script. We had talked about it a little bit beforehand. And I start getting nauseous because he's got viruses in the script, and the viruses are doing things that a virus can't possibly do. And I have a soft spot in my heart for viruses. And people have a real misconception about what a virus is. And this movie was only going to add to it. And no movie that my name was listed as science advisor was going to add to the misconception of viruses. So fluke man, half worm, I'm fine. But the original script had a virus getting inside the toasty confines of a person. And then that virus, you know, as Chris said in the script, mutates you know, somehow, into a huge, hideous creature with big black eyes and fangs and claws, and it's too early in the morning to tell you how that creature comes out of a person. So, and, you know, viruses can't do this. Okay, not even an alien virus, not even a computer virus, okay? I mean, viruses are just, and I'm talking biological viruses here, okay? But viruses are just a bag of genes. There are a couple of pieces of DNA, one or a few, maybe sometimes it's RNA, it's a little different, not much. Surrounded by a protein, maybe surrounded by something else. That's all it is. I mean, it's like asking this chair to turn into a creature. It's not going to happen. So I read the rest of the script, and it's like, oh my God, I'm going to have to try to convince Chris to change a lot. And I've never had to do that before, and I was really scared. So I called him. At first, I thought of something else that he might like. And then I called him up, and I started talking to him, and I said, you know, Chris, viruses turning into creatures. You know, I explained to Chris again what a virus was. I think I'd explained it several times before, but I explained to him again what a virus was and how a virus couldn't turn into a creature. So I said, imagine this scenario instead. The virus gets into a cell, that's okay. Gets inside the body, gets into cells, that's what viruses do. And once it's inside the cell, it activates a resident program that's found in the DNA of the cell. So it gets into a human cell, and it causes the human cell to then start dividing, and the human cell turns into this horrible creature with big black eyes and fangs and claws. And that there's a little bit of science in there. Not much, but there's a little bit. And that little bit is that in all of our genomes, okay, there's a lot of DNA that we understand. It codes for genes. And then there's a lot that we don't understand, and we call it junk. That's what scientists think of it, junk DNA. What's this junk DNA doing? It's there. We don't know what it does. So I'm a scientist. I am allowed to hypothesize. And my hypothesis is that the virus gets into the cell, and it activates a program in the junk DNA, which then turns the cell into a horrible creature. So what it means is that we are the aliens. And Chris liked that, and he ended up changing a lot of the script and changing the next couple of seasons, the science in it, to conform to that, and that's what's going on right now. So that was fun. So people have asked me, have I ever come up with anything like really original? I mean, when people started finding out that I did the science on the show, I got inundated with, oh, I know this really weird phenomena that he should use, and this and this character and that character. Right. Well, I do the same thing to Chris. So I was talking to Chris one day, and once he used one of my ideas. He liked one. I felt very lucky. And I was telling him about these fruit flies. Now, you might not think of a fruit fly as being a monster. It's only 1/8 of an inch long. You probably would just go like this to it. But these are really neat fruit flies. These are fruit flies with legs coming out of their heads, or legs coming out of their mouths, or eyeballs on their legs, or double sets of wings. And these are real flies. These exist. They're caused by single mutations, single genes. And you can get a fly with legs growing out of its head. Chris loved it. This was X-Files material here. So he said, well, where can I find the flies? Where can I get the flies? Well, you can't just, call up someone and get the flies. You have to go to what is basically a fly museum. And there's a fly repository at Indiana University. So I sent him there to talk to my friend Tom Kaufman. I called up Tom first. Turns out he's a big X-File fan. Lab's a big X-File fan. So Chris goes there, and he comes back from Tom's lab with a lot of little things. He comes back with a T-shirt from a recent fly meeting. It's like this. It's like TED, except everyone talks about flies. Everyone works on flies. You know something that only gets a laugh from non-science audiences. Science audiences are going, yeah, right. Fly meeting. Yeah. So he comes back with a T-shirt, a film loop, a picture of the flies, and a diagram where Tom has tried very heroically to try to explain to Chris why he works on these flies and why these flies end up with legs coming out of their heads. And Chris went ahead and he wrote my favorite episode called The Postmodern Prometheus, and I have a scene from it where you're going to see all these little elements. So if you can roll the last segment.
Yes?
Special Agent Scully.
Oh wait, this isn't right.
Yes?
This is Dr. Vitaliano with the
Can you stop it?
Paleoclimatology Department at
This is the first part of the tape that you weren't supposed to be showing. So it's quite a ways into it, so maybe, oh, it's a good segment. I'm sorry if we have to miss it, but it's... Yeah, can you fast forward? I mean, you have to fast forward about 7 minutes. It's a really funny segment. Okay.
30 seconds.
We could sing again.
You got it. We got it. Go.
They promised me they have it. Okay, here it
Sent
is.
you here.
Your father.
My father is a simpleton farmer. He understands nothing of my scientific achievements.
What achievements are those?
What makes you think you would understand them any better?
Well, I'm a scientist for one.
Well, then you probably know that once in a generation, perhaps once in a lifetime, a truth is uncovered. It's thrust mankind into a shocking new consciousness, turning accepted notions of our very existence on their head. Consider relativity, double helix, and now the homeotic Hox gene, for which I will undoubtedly have my place among the Columbuses of science as a visionary leader of men, yes?
What do you want me to do with these, Dr. Polidori?
There's the T-shirt. That's the undergraduate in the lab. You know?
Never mind.
What is the homeotic Hox gene? She's a scientist. Ask her.
I believe that it has something to do with, growth and development.
If you two will excuse me, I really don't have time for this. I have to travel tonight to the University of Ingolstadt to deliver an international address.
Sir, unless you want your scientific achievements to end up as a footnote on the Jerry Springer show, I suggest that you make the time.
Jerry Springer show.
Here's
Witness
here's
the
film.
morphogenesis of Drosophila, the fruit fly. What you are watching has been going on for millennia. Since the Cambrian period, some 580 million short years ago, when Drosophila was first born. Notice the elegant symmetry with which the pupae grows into a series of beautiful segments. What we have found, what I have found,
That's Tom Kaufman's diagram.
is that these segments represent a linear model for the genetic development of our friend the fly. Each gene is responsible for the development of its corresponding segment, the legs, the mouth, the body, posterior and anterior, but which I, through my genius, can alter into a creation of my own. Behold, Roboscopedia.
This fly has legs.
Growing out of his mouth.
Why would you do that? Because I can.
Could that be done in humans?
That would go against every scientific convention,
It says, could it be
Could it
done
be
on
done?
humans?
theoretically.
You can stop it there. Can I have 2 minutes? So clearly this has been a lot of fun, okay, and I've really enjoyed doing it. I mean, the X-Files, I'm not sure about this talk. But then all of a sudden the hate mail started. And, I mean, hate mail. I was really shocked. I mean, it's not that as a professor I've never gotten hate mail. I mean, you give a pre-med student a B, and you're going to learn about how you ruined their lives and how, you know, if you were only a better teacher, they would have gotten an A. You get those. But hate mail from people you didn't even know, talking about how I was promoting pseudoscience and helping to corrupt people's impressions of science in this country. And I literally was shaking when I would read the first letter, because the worst thing you can say to a scientist is that you're helping to promote pseudoscience, you know, belief in aliens and ghosts and vampires and creationism and things like that. So I mean, I sat down. you know, this is really the last thing I wanted to do. So I sat down and I thought about it. You know, was I really helping to promote pseudoscience? And I came to the realization, luckily, that I didn't think I was. That the X-Files is entertainment. It's the E part of TED. It's not supposed to be real. If people believe that there's Fluke Man running around in the sewers, I'm sorry. But, you know, they've got more problems than, you know, than started with the X-Files. But it occurred to me that I had to do something more than just say to myself I wasn't promoting pseudoscience. And that's why I decided to use the X-Files as a hook to try to get people to learn more about science. And that's why I wrote a book called The Real Science Behind the X-Files. And the hope, as I said, was to use the X-Files to try to teach people about science, because this is becoming a real problem today, is that we're being faced with a lot of issues which scientists are saying science is the cure. I mean, we've got this future ahead of us of cloning and genetic engineering and gene therapy, and yet there's probably very few people in the US, probably very few people in this audience that really understand what's going on in that science. And we're facing some pretty severe, I mean, just putting aside just genetic engineering of people or cloning of humans, we're facing some really severe ecological problems in this country based on how we're growing food. I mean, we are dumping hundreds of millions of tons of poisons into our environment. We have more species going extinct right now than at any other time since the dinosaurs died out. I mean, we're talking in TED about legacies for our children. Our children are going to be asking, what caused this species, depletion from the planet? And they're going to be pointing their fingers at us. So I think it's just very important that we concentrate on science education, because one of the cures that scientists have come up with involve genetic engineering that's getting an awful lot of bad flack right now. And the hope is that the more people understand about science, the more that they'll begin to understand some of these cures. And hopefully what I've tried to do with the X-Files is make the X-Files not part of the problem, but maybe a small part of the solution. And I'll stop here. Thanks.
Thank you.